the chairperson, independent policing and oversight authority, the Inspector General of Police, that is National Police Service Commission, the Director of Criminal Investigations, and the chairperson, National Police Commission. The committee also held a retreat with the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, and the CEO of National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, between 30th of March and 1st April 2023 in Naivasha, Nakuru County. Mr. Speaker, a number of legislative gaps emerged during the deliberations held at the retreats, which the committee is currently considering with a view to sponsoring amendments to existing laws. Mr. Speaker, going forward, the committee intends to conclude its considerations of legislative gaps with a view to sponsor bills to remedy the same and undertake a county visits to various counties, including Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, West Pokot counties, Isiolo, to assess the ongoing security situation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism. Okay, as trade gets its footing together, we'll move to the Chairperson, Standing Committee on Roads, Transportation and Housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 56, 1B, to make a statement on the activities of the Standing Committee on Roads, Transportation and Housing for the period commencing 13th October 2022 to 31st March 2023. Mr. Speaker, the Senate Standing Committee on Roads, Transportation and Housing is established under Standing Order 228-3 of the Senate Standing Orders and is mandated to consider all matters relating to transport, roads, public works, housing, construction, and maintenance of roads, rails and buildings, seaports, and communication. Committee meetings. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, the committee held 26 sittings and one joint sitting with the Standing Committee on Land, Environment, and Natural Resources. Business before the committee. During the period under review, the Speaker has committed the following businesses to the committee. 3 petitions. Mr. Speaker, we now have 4 adding to what you've just committed to this committee. 14 statements and 1 message. Petitions. Mr. Speaker, sir, the following are the petitions that have been referred to the committee and are at various stages of consideration. Petition concerning public transport in Lake Victoria between Mfangano Island in Suba Central Sub-County and Mbita, Homa Bay County. The residents of Mfangano Island in Lake Victoria, Homa Bay County, petitioned the Senate to have a public ferry to ply the Mbita-Mfangano route in Lake Victoria. The committee met with the petitioners on Tuesday, 8th November 2022, and engaged them on the content and prayers in the petition. The committee also invited the Ministry of Roads and Transport, who expressed commitment to answer the prayers in the petition. In concluding this matter, the committee scheduled to visit Homa Bay County from 17th and 18th March 2023. However, the visit was postponed at the request of the Senator for Homa Bay. The committee remains committed to conclude this matter. Petition 2. Petition concerning eviction and demolition of Buxton Estate, Mvita constituency in Mombasa County. The former residents of Buxton Estate petitioned the Senate following the eviction and demolition of their houses. The petitioners sought the intervention of the Senate to be accorded an opportunity for them to acquire the houses at the redeveloped Buxton Estate under affordable terms. The committee met with petitioners, the county government of Mombasa, and the developer of Buxton Estate on various dates. Due to the unsatisfactory nature of the responses received by the county government of Mombasa, received from the county government of Mombasa and the developer of the estate, the committee issued them 21 days within which to submit a report on the options available for the petitioners to own houses in the Buxton Estate. The 21 days lapsed on 14th April 2023, that is 5 days ago, and the committee is yet to receive the response. Petition number 3. Petition concerning the title deeds for properties bought at Jamii Bora Estate, Kisaju, Kajiado County. The petitioners petitioned the Senate regarding the purchase of houses and shops from Jamii Bora Charitable Trust and an off-plan housing scheme, but have never received the document since 2008. The committee is considering the petition and intends to invite the petitioners, Jamii Bora Charitable Trust, and other key stakeholders involved in the matter. Additionally, the committee has just received a petition this morning that the petitioner Nikki Muoko Mwancha petitioned the Senate this morning regarding the construction of a pedestrian bridge at Chiromo areas in Nairobi City County. Mr. Speaker, the committee will invite the petitioner and other stakeholders on that matter. Statements. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order 52.1 and 53.1, during the period under review, the following 14 statements were referred to the committee for consideration. Statement by Senator Edwin Sifuna, MP, on the strike by the Kenya Airways pilots. On this statement, the committee was asked to investigate the issue surrounding the Kenya Airways pilot strike. Whereas the statement was related to labor matters affecting the pilots, the strike affected the operation of the Kenya Airways and raised a number of management issues at Kenya Airways. The committee engaged the Ministry of Roads and Transport and was informed that the government will pronounce itself on the strategic decision for revitalization of Kenya Airways, dubbed Project Kifaru, by September 2023. Statement by Senator Mohamed Faki, MP, on the illegal diversion of staff training funds from the accounts of the Kenya Maritime Authority, KMA. Mr. Speaker, on this statement, the committee received a response from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy and Maritime Affairs, which was unsatisfactory, and the ministry was requested to provide more information. We are still waiting for that information. Statement number 3, statement by Senator Lelegwe Tumbesi on the status of implementation of the Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia Transport Corridor, LAPSET project in Samburu County. On this statement, the committee is in receipt of the response from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Roads and Transport to the statement and has scheduled to consider it. On the statement by Senator Alexander Mundigi, MP, on the adverse effects of the collapse of Enna Bridge in Embu County. On this statement, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Roads and Transport, informed the committee that the bridge collapsed due to the overloaded transportation truck. Nonetheless, he informed the committee that the bridge was repaired and was now accessible. The committee established that the response was satisfactory and concluded the matter, and this was reported before the House. Statement by Senator Kathuri Murungi, MP, on the need for redesigning and realignment of Nithi Bridge. On this statement, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Roads and Transport, responded to the committee and indicated that the final designs and tender documents for construction of an alternative route and bridge would be finalized by 31st March 2023. A few days ago, the committee is following up on the matter. Statement by Senator Christo Asige, MP, on road safety and universal design. On this statement, the Cabinet Ministry of Roads and Transport responded to the committee by indicating that the process of stakeholder engagement for draft street design manual for urban areas in Kenya was ongoing, and once concluded, it will be adopted for implementation. The matter was concluded. Mr. Speaker, I'm almost, if you can give me a little bit of time, or you can defer, I can continue tomorrow.
Senator, you have 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, statement number 7. Statement by Senator Samson Cherarke, MP, on rehabilitation and upgrading of Mombasa Road section, left in the state of disrepair following the construction of the Nairobi Expressway. Mr. Speaker, I may not be able to conclude my statement because this is supposed to be a very conclusive report to show that the committee has been giving its statements and work very seriously. So I urge you, if this, we can continue next Wednesday from number 7 to number 14. Yes. Otherwise, I may not be able to complete
Honourable
within...
Senator, proceed to lay your statement. The senators will go through it and they'll probe it at a given time. Just proceed to...
I proceed to lay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the good work the committee is doing. We go back to trade, industrialization, and tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A statement relating to the activities of the Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism pursuant to Standing Order 56-1B for the period commencing 13th October 2022 to 31st March 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 56-1B of the Senate Standing Orders to make a statement on the activities of the Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism for the period commencing 13th October 2022 to 31st March 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, the committee held a total of 23 meetings. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee held its induction and work planning retreat from 5th to 8th February 2023 and met with key stakeholders. The committee consolidated a matrix of legislative bills from the stakeholders which will be incorporated into its work plan. During the period, the committee undertook 2 foreign travel engagements as follows. 1, participation in the 22nd EAC Trade Fair held in Kampala, Uganda from 8th to 18th December 2022, and 2, participation in the Industrial Park Study in Ethiopia from 12th to 20th February 2023. The committee considered and adopted the reports for tabling in the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, the committee considered the following bills. The County Licensing 2022 Uniform Procedure Bill, that's Senate Bill number 9 of 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill seeks to establish standard uniform procedures for licensing by county governments. The bill mandates its implementers to adhere to the need to protect consumers, provide access to information on conditions for issuance of licenses, cost effectiveness in the licensing process, and prevention of multiple licensing processes. The committee processed the bill and tabled its report in this House on 12th April 2023. Then the other bill is the Startup Bill 2022, that's Senate Bills number 14 of 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill seeks to provide a framework to encourage innovation and incentivize the establishment of startups through incubation programs and a streamlined administrative mechanism of registration and operations. The objects of the bill include, among others, to promote an enabling environment for the establishment, development, conduct of business, and regulation of startups. The committee processed the bill and adopted its report for tabling in the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, the committee also considered the following statements. First, the status on the revocation notice of Granville Farmers Cooperative Society Limited by Gazette Notice 8427 in Machakos County, requested by Senator Agnes Kavindu Mudhama MP, and the committee requested a response from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Cooperatives, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development. The committee also engaged the affected farmers, the ministry, the Commissioner of Cooperatives, and the liquidator. That's on Thursday, 6th April 2023, and the committee considered the statement as concluded. However, the committee will follow up on the supplementary and emerging issues within its mandate. The other statement was high cess levied on Muguka cargo transporters in Beere, Embu County, requested by Senator Alexander Mudigi MP, and the committee facilitated a response from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry. The committee also engaged with the affected farmers from Beere, Embu Mira Traders Cooperative Union, and the committee is set out to undertake an inspection visit in Beere, Embu County, to interrogate the issues raised in the statement. The third statement was a statement on the effect of government austerity measures on the hotel industry, requested by Senator Godfrey Osousi MP. The committee requested responses from the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, and the National Treasury is yet to receive the responses. The other statement is on the rise in roadside hardware suppliers in Nairobi City County, requested by Senator Tabitha Mutinda MP, and the committee requested a response from the Ministry of Trade and Nairobi County Government. The committee also resolved to follow up with the stakeholders and the process reminders for the responses. The other statement is a statement on the state of affairs at the KICC, requested by Senator Samson Cherarkei MP. And this, the committee requested a statement from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife, and the Kenyatta International Convention Center. The committee also had a meeting with Senator Samson Cherarkei MP to deliberate on the statement. The statement was concluded. However, the committee will follow up on the supplementary issues within its mandate. The other one is a statement concerning the state of foreign direct investments in Kenya, requested by Senator Samson Cherarkei MP, and the committee has requested a response from the Ministry of Trade, Investment, and it's awaiting a response. The other one is a statement sought by Senator James Murango MP on the measures taken to make Kenyan produce in external markets. The committee requested a response from the Ministry of Trade, Investment, Kenvest, and the Kenya Export Promotion Branding Agency, and the response from the ministry is being awaited. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee is scheduled to consider the following business in the next quarter. One, undertake an inspection visit to engage with affected persons of the liquidation of Dramville Farmers Cooperative Society Limited in Machakos County. Next, undertake an inspection visit to Mbeere, Embu County, to engage with affected Muguka cargo transporters in Embu County. Then organize a conference on high cess levies charged on Muguka transport involving the ECMs of the counties of Embu, Nairobi, Mombasa, Garissa. And finally, undertake a fact-finding visit to Busia and one Malaba one-stop border post to evaluate the status of regional trade and the Kenya-Uganda trade flows. I lay the statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairperson, Standing Committee on National Cohesion, Equal Opportunities and Regional Integration.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 56(1)B of the Senate Standing Orders to make a statement relating to the activities of the Standing Committee on the National Cohesion, Equal Opportunity and Regional Integration for the period between 14th October 2022 to 30th March 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Standing Committee on National Cohesion, Equal Opportunity and Regional Integration is established under Standing Order 2281 of the Senate Standing Orders and is mandated to consider all matters relating to the pursuit of national and intercommunity cohesion, the equalization of opportunities and improvement in the quality of life and the status of all persons, regional integrations, the East African Legislative Assembly, and Pan-African Parliament. During the period under review, the committee held a total of 21 sittings, during which it noted 5 East African Legislative Assembly bills, 5 EARA resolutions, 2 statements, 1 county visit, 1 committee retreat induction, and legislative proposals. A. East African Legislative Assembly EARA bills. Honorable Speaker, during the period, the committee considered the following East African Legislative Assembly bills tabled on the floor of the Senate and referred to the committee. A. The East African Community Competition Amendment Bill 221, 2021, Committee Paper Number 14. B. The Community Appropriation Bill 2022, Committee Paper Number 13. C. The East African Community Supplementary Appropriation Bill 2022, which is Committee Paper Number 12. D. The East African Community Supplementary Appropriation Number 2, Bill 2022, Committee Paper Number 11. E. The East African Community Persons with Disability Bill 2022, Committee Paper Number 15. The committee notes that in future, upon consideration of any bills referred to them, there will be a report to be tabled. B. EARA resolutions. Honorable Speaker, during the period under review, the following East African Legislative Assembly resolutions were referred to the committee by the Senate. 1. Resolution of the Assembly paying tribute to His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, the 3rd President of the Republic of Kenya. 2. Resolutions of the Assembly paying tribute to the late Right Honorable Jacob Ahulanya, former Speaker of Parliament of Uganda. 3. Resolution of the Assembly recommending to the Council of Ministers to urge partner states to strengthen framework for eradicating child sexual abuse in the community. 4. Resolution of the Assembly urging the Council of Ministers to recommend the partner states to enhance gender equality in access to food, nutrition, security in the community. 5. Resolution of the Assembly granting members of the Assembly permission to access official documents of the House to be used in evidence before the East African Court of Justice. C. Statements. Honorable Speaker, during the period under review, 2 statements were sought from the committee, which are 1. A statement sought by Senator Beth Siengo, MP, on the actualization of the not more than 2/3 gender rule in the counties. 2. A statement sought by Senator Crystal Kegehi Asige, MP, regarding the matter of representation of persons with disabilities in the county assemblies. The committee, in considering response from the statements, and will conclude in the next 2 weeks, D, committee inductions and stakeholders engagements. Honorable Speaker, the Standing Committee on National Cohesion, Equal Opportunity and Regional Integration held its induction and work planning retreat between 9th and 11 February 2023 in Naivasha, Nakuru County. The retreat equipped senators with an understanding of the functions, objectives, policy directions, major projects and programs, challenges, legislative gaps, and possible proposals and opportunities for collaboration and cooperation with the relevant ministries and state agencies falling within the mandate of the committee. And this includes, 1, the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, the Ministry of Information, Communication, Digital Economy, the Ministry of East Africa Community, Urban and Regional Development, the Ministry of Cooperatives, Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise Development, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, the National Gender and Equality Commission, the National Council of Persons with Disability, the Council of Governors, the Youth Enterprise Fund, Uwezo Fund, Women Enterprise Fund, the County Assemblies Forum. In the course of the community's deliberation with the various stakeholders, a number of legislative gaps were proposed and are currently being considered by the committee with a view of developing various legislative proposals. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has also been able to meet with the Cabinet Secretary of Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government and the Chairperson National Cohesion and Integration Commission between the 22nd February 2023 and 1st April 2023 to discuss matters of national peace, cohesion, and integrity. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee also conducted a county visit to Kitui for community peace dialogue aimed at restoration of peace and cohesion. The consideration of the 2023 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee considered the 2023 budget policy statement and the medium-term debt management strategy, on which it made critical observations and sustainable recommendations on the policies touching on various challenges and risks that are facing the county government. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, the committee plans to carry out the following key activities in this session. A, consideration of legislative proposal for the County Youth Council Bill with a view of enacting it into law. B, a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of East Africa Community, ASAL and Regional Development. C, undertaking county visit to Tharaka Nithi and Marsabit counties for a peace dialogue meeting. D, regular retreats with key stakeholders and state agencies which fall under mandate of this committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, going forward, the committee intends to conclude pending legislative business that is before it, particularly such business as may be subject to timelines provided under the standing orders or any other law. I beg to lay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Manzo.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to contribute on the next order, with your kind permission.
Senator Chirange.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted your indulgence to raise maybe one or two concerns on the statement that has been laid by the chairperson of National Security and Defense and Foreign Relations and the chairperson of Roads. Maybe one, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the status, I would have expected the chair of Roads and Transport, although time caught him up, to tell us, Mr. Speaker, because I remember when I raised this statement, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the issue of Mombasa Road, repair of lower deck of Mombasa Road after building of expressway, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I've heard in the media, and I've seen the media, that the Ministry of Transport, Roads and Infrastructure has indicated, Mr. Speaker, that they want to repair. And Mr. Speaker, you are aware that there is ongoing rains in the country, and when Kenyans who are using lower deck of Mombasa Road or the old Mombasa Road have a lot of inconvenience, Mr. Speaker, because when it rains, the drainage is poor. You remember the road is now has been, is it thin, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I would request that the chairperson of Roads and Transport to give the House timeline on how that lower Mombasa, old Mombasa lower deck underneath the expressway, the timeline that it should be repaired, especially, Mr. Speaker, before the lapse of the rainy season, so that Kenyans are no longer inconvenienced. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, and last is on the issue of national security, defense, and foreign relations, Mr. Speaker. I wondered, I was keenly listening to the chair when I was coming to the chamber, Mr. Speaker, and I really wanted to get to know whether the Ministry of Interior, national government, is in the process of opening more registration centers. One, Mr. Speaker, before in the North Rift and in Kisumu, we used to have immigration centers where Kenyans, especially from the Nandi and the North Rift region, are forced to go all the way to Kisumu to get renewal of visa or get passport when the Eldoret office was closed. And Eldoret office is temporarily functioning. So I really wanted to know whether the Eldoret office will be open for the convenience of the people of Nandi, Uasin Gishu, and the North Rift. And finally, Mr. Speaker, you remember birth certificates, especially for parents who are registering their children for Class 8, and death certificate for purposes of succession. And it is good that you are a lawyer and you understand the importance of birth certificate, especially in succession. Where I come from, we only have 2 registration centers. That is in Kapsabet town, that is Mkwen sub-county, and Nandi sub-county. And it serves as the entire 6 sub-counties in Nandi. Although one has been opened in Kabia Township in Masab sub-county. So, Speaker, I would have expected the chair to say in the budget that is coming to open more registration centers so that parents can conveniently process their birth certificate and allow them to register their children for KCP and KCSE, and also for processing of death certificates to allow our parents and other Kenyans who want to do succession in terms, not only in Nandi County, Mr. Speaker, but across the country to ensure, and even the improve of border posts like Malaba, like in northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and even the issuance of national identity card to allow the conveyance. Because, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, when you go here, Nyayo House, you get Kenyans as far as Garissa, Mandera, only to come for a service that these citizen services should be made a directory so that a Kenyan should not travel from Mandera, from Kilifi, from Garissa, from Kisumu, from all the way from Malaba, Busia, from Bungoma, Mr. Speaker, from all the way from Lunga to come and just get a service, which they are paying for, Mr. Speaker. So is the chairperson and the Committee on Foreign Relations Defense should be ready to tell us that this border outpost and access to issues like visa, like passport, like death certificate, like birth certificate, Mr. Speaker, be accessible. So, Mr. Speaker, those are my only 3 concerns, and I thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chairpersons, I believe they've taken note of those concerns. The Honorable Senator Fatuma Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to make 2 contributions to the statements made by the chairs. Number one, I do thank them for the good work they are doing. But my concern is, Mr. Speaker, is the implementation of the good work the committees are doing. 2013 to 2017, we had implementation committee that did a very good job as far as committees' work is concerned. And I think over the years, we have raised the importance of having implementation committee in place. So I'm appealing to you, if we could have implementation committee so that our work is successfully, to follow it up also with the relevant government departments, so that work is done to our satisfaction. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to alert the chair of security and the chair of trade, although I sit in security. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the rains today, the few Maram roads that we have, they are all swept by rain's water. Mr. Speaker, especially what is called security roads. And I think maybe at some stage we need to sit and look at those areas where the rains have affected those roads so that we can have issues of insecurity not being affected as a result of the rains in our counties. And I thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The chair has taken note on the need to have the implementation committee, and I believe it's a matter to be discussed at SBC. But we've taken note. Next order, clerk.
Order number 8, the Prevention of Livestock and Produce Theft Bill, Senate Bills number 12 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for a legal framework for the identification of livestock, the movement of livestock, the prevention of livestock theft, the regulation of trade in livestock, the return of illegally acquired livestock and firearms, and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bills number 9 of 2023, second reading.
Honorable Senators, we now resume debate on this bill. This debate was interrupted yesterday, 18th April 2023. At the time of the interruption of debate, Senator Ledama was on his feet and had a balance of 6 minutes. I do not see Senator Ledama in the House, and therefore we shall proceed to allow senators to continue with the debate. Senator Lomenen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity that you have given me. Mr. Speaker, I've been waiting for this opportunity because this is where I am here in this Senate to represent people from Turkana County. Mr. Speaker, if you go through Article 96 of the Constitution that determines the Senate participate in the lawmaking. Above that and on top of that, the Senate determines the allocation of the national revenue among counties as provided in Article 217. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion of division of revenue because, Mr. Speaker, the counties are really waiting for this fund. And most of the counties, especially those from the northern part of Kenya, they are really stranded, wondering because they get pressure. So if these funds will be allocated to these counties, we are exactly be sure that, Mr. Speaker, they will perform their functions well. Mr. Speaker, the reason why this division of revenue is very important. Mr. Speaker, you see, for these counties to function well, to perform their function that are meant to play, they need funds. And Mr. Speaker, just to set an example where certain counties, when the national revenue is being collected and distributed, you find there are issues of uncertainties. Like now, Mr. Speaker, you see areas like Turkana County, areas like Marisabit, maybe I can say marginalized counties, Mr. Speaker, you realize the issue of drought is uncertainty. It is throughout the year, the issue of disasters, the issue of hunger, the issue of famine is throughout the year. And you find that the fund that is allocated to these counties, they use all this fund for disasters, for providing the relief food, providing for bursaries, providing for all these issues that are emerging. Mr. Speaker, so when the revenue, CRA, having the criteria, they forget some of these emerging issues of disasters. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge the CRA and the Senate to consider issues that are emerging, issues that are so emergent in these counties, so that when they consider, they should consider to allocate funds that will specify to deal the issues of disasters, the issues of emergency. Mr. Speaker, there is also an issue that is always forgotten, and I've been also waiting for chairman of the National Security and the Interior. Mr. Speaker, if you realize very well, these counties, most of these counties are insecurity-prone areas. Every time, Mr. Speaker, you find raids happen most of the time. Even I can say, in a week, 4 raids happened in these counties. And I should become specific, Mr. Speaker, because I represent a county. When a raid happens, Mr. Speaker, the definition of a raid that people lost life. I mean, raiders kill people of that county or for the bomber. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, what they do, they take the property, livestock, I mean. And this livestock, when you see, Mr. Speaker, someone has read livestock, maybe camel, cows, or goats, for 80 years. And you find 80 years, these animals are just raided for one hour, 30 minutes. And this person is reduced to 0. From 100 camels, what one camel is worthy to 100,000, Mr. Speaker. So when you have taken 80 years to rear that camels, to bring these camels to survival, but you find you are raided. What happens now? This person is reduced to nothing, and when it is reduced to nothing, the poverty increases in these counties. And what happens? They only depend on the relief, and this relief, Mr. Speaker, the relief is not available. When you find that the relief is the National Disaster Management is supposed to provide relief, it is not there. These families that are affected do not receive the relief, and even the relief that are expected to come from the provincial administration, it takes logistical problems to reach there, and it cannot even 1 kilograms of maize or whatever. It doesn't reach, Mr. Speaker. So these insecurity issues are a big challenge to these counties. So when the county is addressing and making the budget, they forget some of these issues. They forget, and then once they have ended the budget, they find that, Mr. Speaker, they say, oh, okay, we forgot the issue of the budget, the insecurity. The other issue, these areas are fast. Turkana County is 77,000 kilometers square. You can imagine 77,000 kilometers square, which is offer maybe I can equate to maybe three counties. 3 counties. So 3 counties, and then you equalize with one with county. Surely, it beats logic. So the fastness of this area is exhibited by services that are offered there. Now, 77,000 kilometers square, which has a population of over 1 million persons, and they only use one hospital, which is level 3, an early center. And someone someone who is sick from Kibich, traveling all the way to Lodwar, and then is not ill from Lodwar. He traveled again from Lodwar to Eldoret, seeking for services, health services. Speaker. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, there is what we call, as the national government have the stresses of paying public debt. Counties also have stress of paying pending bills. If you hear in every governance, they have pending bills, and these pending bills have a lot of money. For example, pending bills for Turkana counties are over, Mr. Speaker.
Senator, your time is up. You had 10 minutes. Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also like to support. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that the county governments formed one of the political units at the grassroots level. What devolution has been able to achieve in the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker, sir, in some counties, it has managed to bring life-changing changes and economic empowerment to the local communities. Mr. Speaker, sir, in absence of misappropriation and mismanagement of the funds allocated to the county governments, Kenya would be quite far in terms of community development. It is also, Mr. Speaker, sir, something that we should note with a lot of concern, that there are very, very many resources, and I think Senator for Turkana has alluded to that are shared between counties. Hospitals, for example, where I come from in Nyeri County, we had the biggest provincial hospital that still continues to serve a number of counties in the Mount Kenya region. But when it comes to the allocation of resources, it is left on the shoulders of Nyeri County to carry and to pocket all the cost that goes with it. Moving forward, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it will be important for this House to start looking at those services that are shared between counties and come up with a formula how they'll ensure that when we are allocating funds, resources, revenue to the county governments, that is taken into consideration. Because what it ends up doing, Mr. Speaker, is overstretching the resources of one county, while the others enjoy the services, but they do not pay for the same. It is also very, very important, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this House moving forward to start looking at possibilities how we can enact and bring into place legislative framework that will support the county governments to be able to raise their own source revenue. I do remember, Mr. Speaker, sir, when I was living and working in Europe, there was, specifically in Germany, there was in every employee's tax deduction what they used to call Gemeindesteuer. That is a tax that was deducted from every employee working in a particular area, and that money was allocated to that particular area where you work in, because the rationale behind it is that you enjoy the services, infrastructure, and other services that are provided by that particular region. Maybe it is something that we should borrow from, because we see some counties, despite receiving billions of money the last 10 years, we cannot still see the impact of the same. Why? We know, like the National Library, which is a devolved function, some counties do not have that service at all. And it would not be easy for a county to start that service on its own unless we come with a plan how that can be done, so that we'll bring all counties almost at the same level. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also very, very important, as we are discussing the revenue allocation bill in this House, that we also become very, very honest with ourselves. The issue of the pending bill is one of the elephants in the House. Some of them, especially in counties that have changed governors a couple of times, we find that the successful governments do not want to pay the bills left behind by their predecessors. Of course, the law allows or states that pending bills must be the first charge, but we must get away and a means of enforcing that as Senate, so that the entrepreneurs who provide services to the county government are not forced to carry the burden. Equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, as we were having this debate, I noted with a lot of concern that, without wanting to point any side of the House, that some of our colleagues would stand up and say, we need to add this and that. Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe it is the effectiveness of how that money is spent. We know the previous regime did give money in the budget that was eventually not disbursed, because failure to collect enough revenue, the savings were always met by refusing to disburse money to the county government. However, since we have a Kenya Kwanza government that is committed to ensuring that devolution works, it is the commitment of no less a person than His Excellency the President William Samoei Ruto that the devolved units must be given the power, the means, and most importantly, the framework to be able to achieve and realize their vision. We know that achievement in any part of the county in this country is development for this country. And therefore, it is important for us as a Senate to ensure that we pass this bill as presented, and most importantly, to make sure that the money that has been set aside is actually disbursed. We must create a mechanism to ensure that the pending bills that have been outstanding are paid. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, will save many small entrepreneurs, and this being a government of a bottom-up approach, it is important that we get our people down there being paid so that they can be able to continue with their business. As I wind up, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is equally very, very important, as our colleagues on the other side talk about raising this revenue, to also notice that there is the principle of polluter pays in environmental pollution. Same case, Mr. Speaker, sir. We must also embrace this opportunity to put into place laws. Whoever calls for demonstrations should be treated as such, and knowing that we have the freedom in our constitution to demonstrate, but equally to protect Kenyans' property, we must also ensure that those people who damage and destroy people's property are made to pay through the money that their parties get allocated to at the end of the year, so that there is no one Kenyan who's made to lose because someone else is wanting to push for his space in politics and in the pretense of being able to call demonstrations. As I wind up, Mr. Speaker, sir, it would also be very, very important to notice that the government has started moving in the right direction. The cost of unga is coming down, and we're continuing, it's going to come down. It is important to know that we as the Energy Committee are totally engaged to ensure that the cost of energy is coming down so that we can create enablers for us to have an economy that works. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Senator Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I arise to oppose the Division of Revenue Bill this year. Mr. Speaker, we are here for devolution, and the Division of Revenue Bill is the heartbeat of devolution, and devolution is in the Constitution. It is very unfair, Mr. Speaker, to have counties elect governors, they have their own governments, and they're totally unable to function. For the national government has not yet sent money on the ground, and even when we pass this Division of Revenue Bill, it is still, the money still don't find their way on ground. And unfortunately, for quite a number of counties, the expectation of the people has not been met, mainly for delays in funding, and such that even the absorption of the revenue which gets there has a problem because of the time factors. If the money is released too late in the day, by the time any meaningful project is done, you find that time has elapsed and it is abandoned. And therefore, we need to come up with a system such that no matter how little the money, which now for now should be 15% by the Constitution, then it must remain 15% and not less. And that's why Commission of Revenue Authority, the authority put it at 407 billion. It means the government should have made every effort to make sure that they are 407 billion or thereabout, such that if there is a less, it's -1 or +1. And therefore, there's no justification at all, and it is required under Article 218 that there must be justification of the variation, so that we do not continue stifling devolution and the counties. It is very difficult for a governor to sit in the county. He's unable to pay doctors, he's unable to do any development, year goes year in out, and the governor finds himself even in a very difficult position politically, because you have to deliver the promises you made to the people and the expectation of the people. So the monies have been reduced without justification. And for that particular reason alone, then this bill fails. It must be reconsidered again. Government must make an effort and make sure that this is met. We may say that we are paying debts. We may say that we are not raising enough revenue, but I can assure Kenyans that Kenya has a lot of money and a lot of sources of money. It's only that they have been mismanaged. We have a lot of cartels in a lot of government sections, whereby a lot of money is lost, and it is estimated that through cartels and people well connected to the system who do contracts and other things which they never even perform to expectation and eventually end up being paid monies, we are losing close to 2 billion shillings on corruption. And therefore, if we checked on corruption, if we paid up our loans, or if we negotiated our loans, and if we have goodwill from donors and the grants and the partners, I am very sure we will be having more than enough monies we can get to the counties. And therefore, instead of giving the governors a very, very difficult task out there, it is only fair that this House reconsiders this bill, renegotiates with government, and raises the monies to, as the Senate had accepted area and as the CRA had proposed, after thorough investigation and thorough research and consultations, and ended up with 407 billion. It means then the governors will continue not to pay penny bills. What happened to the private citizens who work for the national government and the county governments, having been delayed in their payments, having taken loans from banks, commercial banks, to complete, projects which they are doing on behalf of the government, for that matter, the local, the county governments, then it is only fair that the county government is able to pay these private citizens who have contracts with the government. And if they are not paid, then it means taxes are also delayed, and the revenue collection of the country goes, is also slowed. So it is good, it's just important to have effective government, whether national government or county government. And for the county government to be effective, then it means they must have monies to pay pending bills in good time. There has been a debate on source revenue in the counties, and in fact, if you drive to many towns in our counties, you park for free. Their systems have been has to be put in place such that you pay for parking. There are very many other services. We can raise revenue, but it must be automated. It must be digitalized. Probably we use modern technology. We use M-Pesa for making payments. The land rates, counties own a lot of land where people have plots. If all these revenues are collected, I'm sure counties will meet their expectation. But for them also to be able to put these systems in place, we must fund them, under the Division of Revenue Bill, so that the governors can be able to reorganize themselves to make these investments and make sure that they improve on on-source collection. And even sensitize Kenyans, to the need to pay, the rates and all these charges and the taxes at the county level, so that we can be able to raise monies. If you are running businesses in the counties, there are quite a number of businesses. A lot of them are not collected from, and therefore it systematically affects the on-source, revenue and the collections, and therefore government has to be serious. There have been many promises. Don't blame Mandamano. Mandamanos are perfectly within the law, and they can be peaceful, and they can send a message, and it has happened all over the world. And in fact, Mandamanos have even developed into revolutions where the government does not listen to the people. The latest Mandamano in France was 70% of participation of the citizens, and the government of France had to listen to what the citizens were saying. So therefore, there is no need to amend the constitution or suspend the constitution. It is all that people have to be responsible enough so that a message can be passed. So we cannot blame that for the government to raise revenue or for government to be serious. We are losing money through corruption. There is no proper strategy on how to deal with corruption in this country. We have not seen devolution of anti-corruption services to the counties. The structures have to be strengthened so that corruption is checked from the counties to the national government. And that will make sure that we have enough money to do our functions. If Kenyans were to be honest enough, honorable enough, to be able to conduct a business without shortcuts and corruption and people pushing for payments, whereby they have not done the projects to the expected standards. If there are roads, they have not been done to the big queues, and still somebody finds their way to be paid for services they have not rendered. This is where the country is losing monies. And I am very sure if the current government wants to stop corruption, it can stop it. It has the goodwill, it has the mechanism, but there seems to be laxity in that, or allowing, cartels to be able to penetrate the systems, and all our taxes ends up in a few people's pockets instead of developing the country, instead of developing the businesses, instead of offering support to tourism, so that we can be able to raise a lot of revenue. And tourism in Kenya raises a lot of rainfall. When we have a peaceful government where there is debate, there is bipartisan agreements, and best way forward to make sure that we have fair systems to everybody, so that if the issue of IBC is an issue, let's agree it's an issue. Where we make an error, let's agree it's an error, correct it, and our country moves on. And I believe if we go up in that spirit, we'll build a strong nation, we'll be able to raise enough money to develop the counties. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, development can take place in the counties, and although counties have not performed to the expectation, Kenyans have seen a difference. Kenyans have seen that the counties have brought services which were not there before, roads which had never been done since independence have been done, and the services which had never been delivered to the people, especially health, has been done. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we need to fully devolve health.
I'm afraid the time is up. Senator Ledama, kindly take a balance of 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just have a seat. Proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, apologies for being late. The 6 minutes which were left for me are very, very important, because yesterday, when I stood on the floor of this House, I said that I rise to support the report of the Budget Committee on the Division of Revenue Bill. Today, Mr. Speaker, I want to proceed with the same line of thoughts and convince my colleagues on the importance of debate. Debate, Mr. Speaker, I define it as a terminology used in Parliament for or against any single position. We find ourselves, Mr. Speaker, at a point where we're in this House to be able to defend devolution. In this country, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of misconception that the president is the one who allocates money to county governments. Mr. Speaker, I want to convince my colleagues that it is not the president who sent money to the county government, it is us. And we've got the rule of law, which we are supposed to abide by when it comes to the issues of division of revenue. Mr. Speaker, the framers of the Constitution of Kenya saw it fit to have 3 arms of government: the executive, the legislative arm of government, and the judiciary. The legislative arm of government is the one that has got the power of the purse, the power of the money. Today, we're here, Mr. Speaker, fighting for our counties to be able to get money. The framers of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, saw it fit to set up an independent body called the Commission of Revenue Allocation to be able to advise. And if you read Article 218, Mr. Speaker, it says very clearly that when it comes to division of revenue, if Parliament will see it to deviate from the recommendation of the Commission of Revenue, they have to follow with a memoranda that explain clearly why they are deviating. The Commission of Revenue Allocation saw it fit. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, and when I look at the Senate today, the only person who was in the Senate then, from the other side, is a distinguished senator from Nandi, Senator Cherargei. When we sat here and we debated on a formula to send money to counties, and at that point, we came up with a bare minimum of 370 billion. But Treasury became very clever. For them to be able to get to agree after 11 sittings of debate, they bundled it up the money which is supposed to go to counties as conditional grants. But the other arm of government, the judiciary, actually unbundled it. And that is why we ended up coming up with a new act of parliament called Additional Allocation Revenues to Counties. Now, here we are, Mr. Speaker, and this is why it is very, very important for us to make sure that we defend our counties. KRA has presented to this august house that they have not had a problem in meeting their targets. In fact, they have surpassed their target. During an election year, Mr. Speaker, KRA surpassed their target by 100 billion. Their projection currently is that they'll surpass their budget with a net of 380 billion. Yes, we are a country that has got debt. We have a lot of debt. Every child who is born, Mr. Speaker, today owes this country about maybe 150,000 Kenya shillings. But the question is, when we are deviating from the recommendation of the CRA, what are the parameters that we are supposed to look at? Are we supposed to say, okay, let's deny county money? We are denying the money because, based on the division of revenue, and I want to invite my colleagues to look at the bill as it came from the National Assembly. The division of revenue bill, as it came from National Assembly, following the requirements by Article 218, the memorandum said that they are deviating because money has been sent to the Hustler Fund. Now, I want distinguished men and women of this august house for us to ask ourselves. And this is a challenge that I'm now challenging the KK administration. Your priorities are health. Your priorities are agriculture. Those two are devolved functions. Why are you adding 45 billion to health and keeping the money in the national government and then sending the money to the county government?
Your time is off. Your time is off. I think we agreed at 10 minutes, and we'll stick to that. It's 10 minutes per speaker, Senator. Kindly abide. Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. And as I do so, Mr. Speaker, the reading of Article 96, Sub-Article 1, it speaks to the role of Senate. And that is, Mr. Speaker, to protect the interests of the counties and the county governments. Mr. Speaker, one of the ways through which this House can protect the interests of the county governments, as envisaged in Article 96, is to ensure that the counties receives enough resources, Mr. Speaker, to be able to undertake their functions allocated to the county governments in their constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the entire objective of devolution, I submit, Mr. Speaker, was meant to ensure that resources goes to our counties, as opposed to the previous arrangement before devolution, where money collected were being distributed in an unfair manner, using political considerations and so on. And so, Mr. Speaker, we need to begin this debate from that point. The devolution was meant to benefit the Kenyan people. And by so doing, Mr. Speaker, and we allocate money to the counties, then more development. Just like Mr. Speaker, I served Baringo North as a member of parliament. And Mr. Speaker, even yourself also, you served as a member of parliament. And if you see what CDF was able to do, Mr. Speaker, in terms of schools, construction of schools, in terms of hospitals, that was before devolution, in terms of other facilities, Mr. Speaker, in terms of roads, electricity, and so on. And we were able to see the impact of what CDF was able to do. That was, Mr. Speaker, the essence of devolution. So that when we allocate more money to the counties, then we'll be able to see more development in our regions. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, because of our limitation of resources, as said by a number of my colleagues here, counties have not been able to receive enough resources. Mr. Speaker, my county, Baringo, received 6.4 billion in the current financial year, Mr. Speaker. If you look at that amount, a substantial part of that money, Mr. Speaker, goes to recurrent expenditure in terms of salaries and others. And you are left with a very small amount for development. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we allocate, like in this particular bill, we are proposing 385 billion to go to the counties. But if you go to the counties, Mr. Speaker, there is little development seen in those counties. In fact, you see more what CDF has done as opposed to what money from these county governments has done. And Mr. Speaker, I think there are two issues I want to raise in this particular debate. One is that the huge sums of that allocation goes to recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, you served Kilifi as a governor for 2 terms. And I know what I'm saying is true, that even when you wanted to do much in Kilifi, you didn't have enough money because much of the money given to you was going to recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the other issue is even the little money remaining now for development, there is no value for money. Again, because the roads are not done very well, the hospitals are not built to standards, even the ECD classes and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, I think, apart from suffering from the shortfall of the revenue allocated to our counties, there is need for this House. And that is, Mr. Speaker, why Article 96, Sub-Article 4, talks about the oversight of this House on the manner in which the money allocated to the counties is utilized. That, Mr. Speaker, brings me to the issue of the oversight fund. Unless, Mr. Speaker, we empower this House so that we are able then to follow the expenditure of that money, we still have the same problem, because then we'll face 2 problems. One, the revenue is not enough, and even the little for development remaining, Mr. Speaker, after recurrent expenditure is also misused in terms of the manner in which projects are done. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that one of the ways of ensuring that we have value for money is to empower the Senate to undertake its responsibility of oversight as envisaged in Article 96, Sub-Article 4 of our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with members who have proposed that perhaps we need to agree with a proposal by CRA of 407 billion allocation to the counties. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it is also important for us to be practical in this country. Today, Mr. Speaker, the country is paying huge sums of money towards loans, to repay the loans. Mr. Speaker, I think as we move forward, as we restructure our loans, as we continue to improve our economy, these figures, Mr. Speaker, in future should indeed move from 385 billion to maybe 400 and 50, 407, and so on as proposed by CRA. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support the figure of 385 now because of our economic situation as a country. But there is need to pursue a further increment even as we advance as a country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other thing I wanted to raise in this debate is how do we enable the county governments to enhance their own revenue? Mr. Speaker, you are aware that we have these economic blocks in our counties, in central Kenya, in Rift Valley, even in Nyanza, even in Coast, Mr. Speaker, you have the economic blocks. The intention, in my view, of these economic blocks, county economic blocks, Mr. Speaker, was to strengthen and create opportunities for the neighboring counties and create jobs for our people and enhance business. And this will help the counties now to enhance their revenue collection in their respective areas. Mr. Speaker, I think we need as a House to see how best we can strengthen these economic blocks. Is it grounded in law? If not, I think we need to do so, Mr. Speaker. The second point, Mr. Speaker, is disbursements of money. It is one thing, Mr. Speaker, to allocate the money, 385 billion to the counties, and now to disburse it again. I think, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we need to put in place rules, regulations, legislations, law, that will make it automatic. Once you allocate, Mr. Speaker, money to the county, then because, Mr. Speaker, the challenge we have is that you allocate the money, and then you await collections now for the resources. And I also want to believe that even after receiving the resources, there is no willingness by the national government to quickly avail funds to the county. So it's an area, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to also look into so that we have a clear mandatory position of remittance of the allocations to the counties. Mr. Speaker, I heard my colleague, Honorable Manso, talking about when we do mandamano, we collect more money. I think, Mr. Speaker, that is really shocking to me, because when we go through the mandamano business, Mr. Speaker, it hurts business. Direct investment by investors from abroad, Mr. Speaker, will be discouraged. Even the local businessmen will not be able to really do their business, Mr. Speaker. And we even learned recently during the mandamanos, we lost a lot of revenue in terms of people not working.
The Honorable Senator Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to join my colleagues in supporting the Division of Revenue Bill, although I would like to support with amendments. Amendments, Mr. Speaker, to support our own internal committee, the Committee of Senate, that stuck with the recommendation from CRA. And I want from the onset to say, Mr. Speaker, requesting for amendments will only take us to a very good mediation between this House and the other House. And it's very, very enriching to do that, Mr. Speaker, because it is at that point that we see there are two sides. I want to thank our committee because they worked very hard. They were able to calculate and they were able to understand. Mr. Speaker, in the last Senate, I was involved in mediation only once, but CRA is a committee that was able to rationalize the duties and functions of county governments in relation to the national government. And in most of their recommendations, they were able to take us through. And I wonder, it looks like we didn't go through that process this year, but they were able to take us through the functions, especially the agriculture functions. And you know, Mr. Speaker, currently we are having problems because of high costs of production, fertilizer. And I want to thank the government for really coming in with interventions that have given us subsidized fertilizer. I come from a grain growing area, and that has helped us quite a bit. But we also need to look at look for long-lasting solutions. And the long-lasting solutions is to enable the devolved governments to do what they were supposed to do. Because the devolved government, Mr. Speaker, has areas that have been assigned in the Constitution in Schedule 4. And according to Schedule 4, agriculture is 100% devolved except for policy. Health is 100% devolved except for policy. The reason I think if we allow our committee to have a mediation season, it will yield fruits, is the fact that there is one very nice indication that has been proposed in this division of revenue bill on the transfer of library services. It may be time for us to transfer even some of the activities in the Ministry of Agriculture and some of the activities in the Ministry of Health. It might not require real new money. We may actually be able to transfer money that is already resident in the ministries and just relocate. So an amendment to support our committee would have really helped in the mediation stage to be able to look at the areas that need to be moved. It will not affect any other functioning of the national government. It will only require that we relocate and allow funding to flow. Because currently, Mr. Speaker, you look at the budget that has been given the Ministry of Agriculture, and the 7% of what has been allocated to the counties, and the national ministries are still holding more money than the money that goes to the counties as far as those areas are concerned. When we listened to CRA in the last Senate, the CRA was able to tell us the percentages that have been approved in the Malabo agreements, in the Abuja agreements, percentages that should be going to health, percentages that should be going to education, percentages that should be going to agriculture. If we use those as our standards, because we are actually obliged to do it because we have signed these agreements, you will find that some of the areas where the county governments are suffering is just because of the non-transfer of the functions that have been given to them. So I was very happy to see that the library services are being transferred, and I would really urge that through our committee, we get more transfer of activities. What is it that is being held by the Ministry of Agriculture that should be going down? Let us analyze those and transfer them. And this is the point to transfer. It is when we are dealing with the division of revenue, because you transfer the function and the function is followed by the money, and that money will go up automatically without looking for new money. Same thing when it comes to the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health is devolved, but we still see a huge budget that is in the Ministry of Health headquarters. Why should we not facilitate? Our doctors are suffering. Doctors are now up in arms that they will be on strike in a few days. And you ask yourself, why should that be? Why don't we start looking at what functions were transferred, what functions were not transferred, so that we use them to move? So to me, Mr. Speaker, CRA was right to give us. The other reason I believe that that 7 billion increment from CRA makes a lot of sense is the fact that when you look at the revenue itself, the revenue has increased by more than 15%. All they are asking for is the increment of the counties to be at 10%. That 10% is at 7 out of the 370 billion that is currently on. So that percentage is still below the increment in the revenue that is being collected. So it makes a lot of sense to actually give that figure of that 7 that will give us 407. Mr. Speaker, I wind up by saying it is so important that we allow the committee of this House to have a healthy discussion with the other committee through a mediation, nothing acrimonious, just to discuss and see what needs to be transferred and which money needs to be spent from which arm, from which corner, or from which level of government, because it is just a matter of movement of that fund. If we allow the movement of functions and the funding to follow the functions, we will not have to do anything more, and we will not even touch the allocation that we are talking about in the analysis on the fund that should be catering for our debts, which we must pay, and I support the national government that it must be paid, and any other functions that the government would like to undertake, it will still be the same. But let's allow the flow of the transfer of functions. That way, as you know, because you are a governor, it will allow the functioning of the devolved government the way it is supposed to be according to the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Veronica.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this very important debate on the division of revenue bill, which is before this House, Mr. Speaker. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I would wish to note that if Senate existed for any other purpose, Mr. Speaker, then this is one of such core purposes, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that a bill of this nature, Mr. Speaker, is dealt with in an expeditious manner in order to ensure that, Mr. Speaker, the counties are very well resourced for the functions that they have been assigned under the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And from the very onset, Mr. Speaker, let me say this. While there is need to engage in robust debating of a bill of this nature, yet, Mr. Speaker, we must also understand that the process that is being done by Senate right now must be done in such a manner as to ensure that, Mr. Speaker, it is dealt with in an expeditious manner without unnecessary bottlenecks, Mr. Speaker, due regard being had to the fact that the allocation of these resources, Mr. Speaker, are needed to ensure that counties are functional and that there is sensitivity in our operations to the needs of the people of Kenya. And, Mr. Speaker, that such can be dispensed with so that the resources that need to go to the counties are not unduly held. Because, Mr. Speaker, a long delay in dealing with such business, Mr. Speaker, at Senate would necessarily mean that there is a delay in the functions being resourced or being supported, Mr. Speaker. I want to draw, Mr. Speaker, your attention to Section 5E of the Division of the Revenue Bill 2023, the fact that national government continues to sorely bear shortfalls in revenue in any given financial year, while county governments receive their full allocation despite the budget cuts affecting the national government entities. Mr. Speaker, this provision, having been pronounced in this bill, clearly shows the spirit with which the national government has been dealing with county government insofar as allocation of resources are concerned, Mr. Speaker. It shows that the national government has gone out of its way to ensure that county governments receive the resources that are due to them in spite of the serious budget cuts that have been done affecting the entities and the functions of the national government, Mr. Speaker. Does that portend good faith or bad faith? Mr. Speaker, in my very humble proposal, it shows very good faith from the national government insofar as allocating resources to county government is concerned, Mr. Speaker. I also want to draw our colleagues to the principles set out under Article 203, Mr. Speaker, that have been put into serious consideration before this bill was drawn, Mr. Speaker. Out of those stipulations, Mr. Speaker, you will find there are considerations of national interest, Mr. Speaker,
what must be provided for the public debt also, Mr. Speaker. I think it is now common knowledge that our national government is ridden with debt, Mr. Speaker. This bill has ensured that there is provision for that debt, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, if you look at how the surplus of a budget is supposed to be managed in the event that national government managed to get a surplus of revenue, then, Mr. Speaker, you will find that that surplus has been assigned directly to handle debt. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because when a country is ridden with debt, it continues to be a very big risk to the operations of that nation. And that is why it's important, Mr. Speaker, that the Constitution has also provided that any surplus must then be tackled or applied towards reducing the debt. But if we look at the current Division of Revenue Bill, Mr. Speaker, there are two things that one must consider. Does it meet the constitutional stipulations, Mr. Speaker? I would say yes. And I would draw your attention to Section 6 of the Division of Revenue Bill. The calculations of the equitable share that is supposed to be allocated for year 2023 to 2024 is based on the last audited account of 2019-2020. That is 1.673715 trillion, Mr. Speaker. This is the last audited account and approved by National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. So the reference to that specific audited account of 2019 to 2020 is in good order, Mr. Speaker, and is the one that is constitutionally allowed. If you look, Mr. Speaker, also at Article 203, Sub-Article 2, Mr. Speaker, it also stipulates that the allocation cannot be less than 15%. If you look at the current allocation of 385 billion, Mr. Speaker, this allocation stands at 23.5, Mr. Speaker, which is approximately 9.5% above the stipulated constitutional provision, Mr. Speaker. So in my view, Mr. Speaker, this allocation of budget is practical, it is reasonable, it meets the legal stipulation, Mr. Speaker, and nothing should hold it away from being voted in. And I would take this opportunity to persuade my colleagues on the other side, Mr. Speaker, to consider this to be a good bill and to pass it just the way the National Assembly passed it, to pass it, Mr. Speaker, and accept this allocation of 385 billion, because it will give an opportunity to Kenyans to live within their own means, Mr. Speaker. There is a way we could say that allocation be done beyond 385, and then the funds are not available for disbursement to the counties, Mr. Speaker. For the last few months, everybody is crying, begging the Minister for Finance to release funds to the county, Mr. Speaker. Does it make sense then to draw a bill which states big figures, Mr. Speaker, without considering the fact of the fiscal capacity? If you look at Article 202, Sub-Article E, it talks about the fiscal capacity of the county government. And in the same breath, Mr. Speaker, we must consider the fiscal capacity of the national government to disperse the resources. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, this allocation is equitable. It meets the legal stipulation, it meets the accounting stipulation, and Mr. Speaker, I would support this bill and ask my colleagues to avoid a situation or a trap of sending it to mediation, because it would elongate the process and continue to deny the resources to counties that are required to move to the counties. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support the Division of Revenue Bill 2023.
Senator Gataya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving this opportunity to contribute to this very important bill on revenue allocation. Considering the fact that, Honorable Speaker, these are some of the very fundamentals as to why we are here as a Senate, because that is our core responsibility to make sure that we have devolved resources to our mother counties across the country. Honorable Speaker, the inception of devolution created a very viable environment for our locals downstream. So it is therefore important, Honorable Speaker, that as we debate, we have to urgently consider the fact that devolution created a way of life because we decentralize services to our counties. That's creating quite a number of significant developments across the board. Honorable Speaker, if I were to make some arguments, I would say that devolution was incepted without some levels of preparedness. Because, Honorable Speaker, I've happened to serve in the counties for close to 10 years, and there's some responsibility, there's some departments that were involved when the whole system was not prepared. For example, Honorable Speaker, if you look at the Ministry of Health, quite a number of counties are struggling with the Ministry of Health and Agriculture. And of course, those two ministries form the backbone of quite a number of activities in counties. If you look at health, the Honorable Speaker, I don't know for what reason the national government decided to have some little resources devoted to counties. That is stifling and crippling Ministry of Health, especially in counties, Ministry of Health and Agriculture. So in this respect, Honorable Speaker, that I don't know whether we are supposed now to move and create a policy through which we are supposed either to advise the national government to track that decision that the Minister of Health and Agriculture should maybe remain in the national government or maybe fund those two key functions in the counties. Another point, Honorable Speaker, is that I think the formula that the Commission for Revenue Allocation has been using for close to 10 years now is almost getting outdated. We are supposed now to review some of those formulas that those commissions are using to allocate revenues. For example, Honorable Speaker, if you go to my county, Tharaka-Nithi County, the money that is being allocated to Tharaka-Nithi County is not even enough, even to cater for quite a number of activities. And I'm very sure there are so many other counties that are really struggling to make their ends meet. So I think it is through this House we are supposed to create a system to make sure that we have made some reviews, some considerations on how we are supposed to create some more energetic formulas through which we are supposed to have the Commission for Revenue Allocation allocate monies to counties. So, Honorable Speaker, it is important also to note that as much as we discuss, we also have to, I want to support, I think it's Honorable Cheptumo who said that we have a problem in revenue collection in counties. There are quite a number of leakages, so that you find that one of the reasons why we have even the pending bills is when the counties budget and then they fail the target of correcting the target and the revenue. That's why you end up, you are budgeting something, so along the way you just fall short of the budget. That way you fail to meet your target and you fail maybe to pay your contractors and so forth. So in this respect, Honorable Speaker, I don't know, we are supposed now as a Senate to make sure that we have created a system through which we are supposed to strengthen the revenue allocation expenses to counties so that maybe we can strengthen their revenue base. So in this respect, Honorable Speaker, this is a critical bill. As a Senate, we are supposed to make sure that we have moved with a lot of speed. Like in Honorable Speaker, there is a lot of cry downstream in the counties where the information is that we have almost like 5 months since the counties have received their allocation. So you can imagine 5 months down the line, people have not been paid, no salaries, no development, no anything, and there are quite a number of pending bills in those counties. So in this respect, Honorable Speaker, I beg to strongly support the bill, and so that we can make sure that our counties realize the allocation that is intended for. Thank you.
Senator Karungo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I rise to support the Division of Revenue Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, as I support, I would want you to imagine if you had two uncles whom you know very well are struggling financially. And one of them on your birthday tells you that I'll give you 500,000 shillings. And another one will tell you, I'll give you 1 million, but you have to wait for about 6 months. So, Mr. Speaker, with your wisdom, you know they are struggling financially, and the one who is giving you 500,000 has the cash with him. Would you take the 500,000, or will you wait for the million that you'll be given in a couple of months to come? Mr. Speaker, I believe you would take the available amount because you can see it, and for sure you do know it is available. I want to equate this government as a government of that uncle who has the money and knows how much he has and how much he wants to share. Mr. Speaker, counties have been given money through letters, through previous division of revenue bills, and these monies have not been dispersed in counties because they have been given certain amounts. They are told we'll give you this kind of millions, but they are rarely dispersed to the counties, even until the end of financial years. Mr. Speaker, to cure this, the current administration has come up with measures to make sure that they can only provide what is within the law and what is viable and what is available, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe this division of revenue bill, despite the counties not getting what they were proposing, at least they have got a big amount of share that is going to be remitted to them once we hit the revenue, national revenue. Mr. Speaker, 385 million to all counties will be divided equally to all counties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's also good to note, out of these monies, the national government has unbundled one of the counties' function, which is the library services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the library services that is under the Kenya National Library Services has been collecting at about 425 million Kenya shillings every year. Now that money has been given to the counties, Mr. Speaker, because it is a function of the county. Mr. Speaker, the counties have been cushioned in the sharing of this revenue, and that can be seen in the memorandum under Section 5 that says that if the national government is unable to raise the revenue, then to read it, if the actual revenue raised nationally in the financial year falls short of the expected revenue set out in the schedule, the shortfall shall be borne by the national government, Mr. Speaker. That tells you that this government is a genuine government. Mr. Speaker, it also says, if the actual revenue raised nationally in the financial year exceed the projected revenue set out in the schedule, the excess revenue shall accrue to the national government and may be used to reduce borrowing or pay debts. Mr. Speaker, we are where we are because of debts that were accrued by the previous regime, Mr. Speaker. This national government has looked at it, and in the course of trying to give a remedy, Mr. Speaker, it says that we are going to clear the debts so that we lower the charges, Mr. Speaker, that our people pay. Mr. Speaker, the question we need to ask ourselves, do we need to raise the taxes so that we can give more money to the counties, or lower the taxes and give what is supposed to be given to the counties, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I've had one of the honorable members here from the opposition saying that he does not understand why the money was given to the Hustler Fund. It is the same people who are in the streets, Mr. Speaker, saying that we need to lower the prices of unga, Mr. Speaker. But this government of ours, the government of Kenyans, had seen that for you to be able to buy unga, you need a resource, you need an income. For you to get an income, you need capital. For you to get capital, somebody must accord you that capital. And that's why the government is doing that, giving the hustlers some hustler funds so that they can do business. They get some little money, and that money will be used to buy the unga that the government is working on lowering, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I urge the county governments, and especially the honorable members of the county assembly, they should come up with their law, almost like this one, Mr. Speaker, and they call it equitable distribution of resources to the wards, Mr. Speaker. Nothing stops them. The amount of money that they get from the national government, they can take that money and allocate, distribute equally to every ward, Mr. Speaker. For example, they can say 40% of the development money will be shared equally to each and every ward, Mr. Speaker. This way, we will avoid governors who maybe do not like some certain MCAs, some certain wards, that they don't disburse money to those wards. This will, of course, save such wards that do not receive recognition from the governors, Mr. Speaker. So I urge the county assemblies to come up with a law like this one, or close to this one, so that each member or each citizen of each ward to get the resources as they come from the national government. And as I wind up, Mr. Speaker, I call upon the Senate. We are very good at disbursing, distributing, and passing this law, and the money is disbursed to the counties. But sometimes we are unable to check on how that money is used by the governors, Mr. Speaker. So I urge the honorable members, as we take this money to the counties, let's follow them. Let's follow these shillings by shillings and see what the governors are doing with the money that the national government has disbursed or has allocated to the counties. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to contribute on the revision of the bill. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, the responsibility of this Senate is to safeguard the interests and to see that devolution succeeds. As you're aware, the last budget, 2022-23, the counties was given 370 billion, of which, up to date, 125 billion was not disbursed. And most of the counties are now facing big problems of, giving services to the Wananchi. You are seeing our doctors every day are on the streets, which is very unfortunate. People of that cadre should not be they should not be at the streets demonstrating around because of their salaries. Mr. Speaker, one other thing is, if you look at the national government, most of the functions of Ministry of Health has been abandoned and taken to counties. The Ministry of Agriculture equally, the functions have been abandoned and taken to the counties. While the counties are now crying for only 22 billion difference. The 385 proposed here and what was proposed by the CRA is a difference of only 22 billion. At the same time, the national government has increased the budget for water. They have increased the budget for health. This has been increased the budget for agriculture. And these functions, most of them have been taken to the counties. It has not been abandoned, and it has not been, money has not followed. Mr. Speaker, I think that has not been very fair. Despite, we understand the situation of the country economically, but however, if only the monies for the counties are released in time, I think they will be able to manage the situations on the ground. One of the problems is actually, Mr. Speaker, due to lack of proper oversight, there is a lot of corruption ongoing in the counties. And I think we're losing a lot of revenues through the county, through corruption and seepages. And I think this Senate must put in action and go and work hard to see that the monies in the counties are saved. If that money is saved, and that we are able to control the budget, the corruption, then I think we'll know the counties will be able to meet its mandate, it will be able to meet its functions. But however, I think what the percent of money that is lost through seepage of corruption, it's more than what they are requesting for. So I think it's a high time this House should take responsibility to empower the assemblies so that they also do a proper oversighting so that we can be able to control money loss through corruption and minimize at least corruption in the counties. One other thing, Mr. Speaker, we need to increase our efforts as a House to see that actually my committee of the devolution now is following up that all the functions that have been devolved must be taken to the counties, especially for Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture, so that at least then the same functions that have been devolved, the money should be at least sent also to the counties, like they have done for the laborers. So agriculture equally should at least send the money to the counties and all the functions now that have been devolved. Agriculture equally should do the same. I think this is the high time that we'll be able to settle this business of push and pull between the national government and the county government. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the bill. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, there being no senators wishing to contribute, I will now call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all the senators that have taken time to give their input and feedback on Division of Revenue 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, like I said during the moving of the bill, this is perhaps one of the most important assignments that as a senator you get to undertake in this House, where you sit down, discuss with your colleagues, and agree on the vertical distribution of resources between both levels of governments, Mr. Speaker, between the national and the county governments. And I have listened to ideas from colleagues on how they intend to go about this exercise. Of course, we have listened, Mr. Speaker, to many of our colleagues lament about the need either to ensure that there is more prudent utilization of these resources. I couldn't agree with them any better. Mr. Speaker, that's given, and we shouldn't have a big fight about it. Mr. Speaker, second and most importantly as well, we have also agreed as Senate on the need to continuously defend and stand for the interest of county governments, Mr. Speaker. I know many people, and I have listened to especially our colleagues from the minority side, and it's unfortunate as I reply, most of them are not here. Mr. Speaker, keep on humming and remind us that, we need to send additional resources to the counties and so on and so forth. But, Mr. Speaker, in my moving notes earlier, I pointed out to the challenges that you're experiencing economically, Mr. Speaker, and reminded our colleagues that many of the sins that you are paying for are sins of the past. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the economy is such that we live today under the shade of the trees that we planted in the yesteryears. Such is the guidance of the economy as well, that today we pay for the sins of the economic either prudent or improper management that the decisions that we make today. The real impact, Mr. Speaker, of the economic decisions that we make presently will be further years down the line. And it is so evident, Mr. Speaker, given the kind of a financial situation that we find ourselves in, as our colleagues find comfort in running on the streets and screaming themselves hoarse, saying that the economy needs to be managed better. Of course, we have equally reminded them that many of these challenges, whether it's debt or complete pilferage of resources, it was done under their watch in the previous it was done under the watch of the previous administration, of which there were very strong supporters and defenders of, Mr. Speaker. We were in this House jointly with them, and on many afternoons, unlike us who are magnanimous on many occasions to allow them to debate,
On many occasions, you are being told, oh, let the mover reply. If you have a problem, go and speak it elsewhere. And that is why we find ourselves in this situation, Mr. Speaker. But I want to appreciate the new administration that is in office, the interventions that are being made in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, interventions that are being made, Mr. Speaker, in even just ensuring that we are fiscally responsible, reducing on our fiscal deficit from 5.7 to 4.4% in the next financial year, the reforms that are taking place in Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I know that many of the purveyors of graft in KRA are not happy. That's why they are beginning to hire people across in the media, in parliament, in different places, or trying to run fake stories, Mr. Speaker, and theories about why our revenue is not performing as per the expected levels. And I'm glad KRA issued a clarification, Mr. Speaker, and said, good ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for people to blame, please do not include us. Because much as there is a lot that they could do better, Mr. Speaker, they are really trying in very difficult economic situations where, you know, people forget, Mr. Speaker, that the largest taxpayer is actually government. And when government is not doing well, then you don't expect your revenues to do any better, Mr. Speaker. If government is not spending, if government is not paying its suppliers because they are restrained or they don't have the resources to spend, Mr. Speaker, then you find yourself in the kind of situation and the mess that you're in. But I'm glad, Mr. Speaker, that as we discuss this, I saw that our colleagues in the counterpart house have already passed the supplementary budget. Many of the state agencies are now beginning to spend, and the same can be seen in revenue targets. And I see KRA have issued a further alert saying that they are on course actually to raise in excess of 2 trillion, Mr. Speaker. Of course, a lot of it, as we all know, in excess of 1 trillion, Mr. Speaker, will go back to fund debt. And that will be an extremely difficult situation to find ourselves in, Mr. Speaker. But I know that eventually when they are done with putting in place a new administration, I know they are recruiting a new commissioner general and so many other things that are being done, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that as a revenue authority, they raise the necessary resources for us to share with our county governments. I appreciate also, Mr. Speaker, that many of the colleague senators that have spoken to this matter have insisted and implored on each other the need to ensure that there is better use of resource at the various levels of our county governments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are two things that I want to say. Number one, I want to challenge colleague senators that perhaps after all is said and done, once we have passed division of revenue and perhaps even CARA, let us come and discuss also, because senators are akin to board chairpersons and governors are like CEOs running the institution. We oversight. We might not be involved in the day-to-day operations, but we see how the entities that we superintend are performing. How can we possibly sit as a Senate of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and be comfortable that of the monies that we devolve to our county governments, in excess of 70, and in some counties even 80%, are being consumed under recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker, leaving very little amounts to, Mr. Speaker, to do actual development, Mr. Speaker. Yet, we have passed PFM regulations, and we know what the statutory requirement is. But I can tell you for a fact, not a single county government, check in your counties, colleague senators, not one county government in this country is compliant with the provisions of PFM with regards to the division between recurrent and development. We need to sit down and pass a resolution as a house. We must demand of each governor to stop giving us excuses and file a recovery plan with this house so that you tell us, my recurrent is at 80%, but in the next 2 or 3 financial years, my finance and planning department has assured me that if we stop recruiting, if we put a freeze on increment, say, of salaries, if we reduced on certain expenditures that are not necessary at this particular time, we will be on course, Mr. Speaker. That's why, if you check through the current formula that we passed for division of resources, Mr. Speaker, there is 1% of these funds that is enjoyed Or if you look into the build-up of a formula, Mr. Speaker, let me put it better, because I want to take that again for members to understand. As a compilation of all the factors that inform what goes to a specific county, when you think about population, poverty index, health index, Mr. Speaker, there is 1% that goes to the specific counties that are properly managing their resources, Mr. Speaker. That 1%, because I think next financial year, Mr. Speaker, we begin again the conversation of the fourth generation formula for dividing or sharing resources among its counties, Mr. Speaker. We need to inbuild this particular matter, Mr. Speaker, so that we ensure that we expect and we demand of our county governments, Mr. Speaker, that they manage their resources better, so that we know my county is currently doing 70%. It's a shame, Mr. Speaker, that unfortunately, if we ask ourselves, even the senators that are in the House currently, many perhaps, and these are reports that are available, I have said this times without number. If you ask a good number of senators, what is the split in your county between recurrent and development? Unfortunately, very few know the numbers often. Yet, that informs the very direction that your county is taking. Because if your governor is spending 20, 25, or even 15% on development, then no matter how much noise you make, no matter how much you demand prudent use of the same resources, Mr. Speaker, if it is a small quota and a small allocation, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, your constituents will never realize the proper fruits of devolution as is enshrined in our Constitution and as our people expected of us, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that we find ourselves in this situation. I hope, and I will be moving together with colleagues in leadership, that perhaps we do a motion jointly, concrete with the resolutions, where we shall expect of the controller of budget and the auditor general that each of our counties file a recovery plan so that we know what eventually will be the final solution, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, I beg to move. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order number 66.3, I beg to move that putting of the question on this motion be deferred to a later time, Mr. Speaker, bearing in mind that the quorum issues and the need for our whips to mobilize, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Majority Leader, indeed, the putting of the question in regard to that particular motion is deferred.
The Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2023, second reading.
The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance and Budget.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill be read a second time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important bill that is in regards to the marginalized counties, a bill that is as per Article 204 of the Constitution. The Equalization Fund, which was established in 204, its basic mandate is to facilitate the provision of the basic services, that is the water, that is health, electricity, and the roads. In this bill, Mr. Speaker, it is in regards to 34 counties. 34 counties which constitute of 1,424 marginalized areas that have been spread across these different counties. This is a bill, Mr. Speaker, that has been appropriated funds amounting to 54 billion in the financial year 2021-2022. And Mr. Speaker, on this particular bill, 26 billion has already been approved by the National Assembly in the first supplementary budget. And out of this 26 billion, Mr. Speaker, 12 billion has already been remitted in this fund, Mr. Speaker. Out of this, there's a balance that is amounting to 13 billion out of the 54, out of the 26 billion that had already been remitted. And in this appropriation, the bill provides a total of the 13 billion, which comprises of 6 billion for financial year 2021-2022, and 7 billion for financial year 2022-2023, Mr. Speaker. This bill also has a schedule on the equalization allocation, as I said earlier, on the 34 counties out of the 47 counties that has been identified. Within those 34 counties, 1,400 are different regions within the 34 counties that have been identified. This is a very important bill, Mr. Speaker, because on the issues and the services that are supposed to be offered on the specific areas, as far as the health is concerned, as far as the roads are concerned, electricity issues are concerned, Mr. Speaker, you realize as devolved functions as per the fourth schedule, these are very important issues in regards to this bill, because health sector is a very important factor, and these funds are going to improve the health sectors within the different areas of the 1,400 areas that have been identified. We have the first allocation, Mr. Speaker, that had been remitted to the counties. And do you realize that out of the delay of the disbursement of the funds, some projects have not been completed? Some projects have also been completed, but the contractors have not been able to hand over these projects, hence delaying the key service that is supposed to be offered in these institutions. Like, for example, even some of the buildings, that the small hospitals that have been put in place, but they cannot be utilized by the local people in those particular regions, and hence brings a challenge. So this is a very important bill, because it is going to ensure that these funds are going to cater for the services that they're supposed to cater for. We have regions and areas like the eastern region, whereby the electricity issue, which is part of this fund, you find that some areas we have challenge. And you see the education factor that we had, the previous government had mentioned in terms of ensuring that there is electricity to these different regions. There are challenges, there are institutions, there are schools, learning institutions that have not been able to have this commodity, this key element that helps in different aspects, from use of different gadgets. We are in a digital space, and without some of these things like electricity, then it brings a challenge to this particular region. So this is a very important bill, Mr. Speaker, as far as ensuring that these services are able to reach to the marginalized counties. Not only just reaching, but also the timely reach of these particular services. This bill also, Mr. Speaker, the Equalization Fund Advisory Board will also immediately commence identifying the projects to be implemented. We have the projects that had already been identified, and also there's an opportunity to identify projects. And this identification, Mr. Speaker, you realize that there are some committees that are going to be formed with the assistance of also the National Treasury, with the Fund Advisory Board, that this committee at the mashinani level are going to ensure that they are going to come up with projects that are touching and are immediately going to help the communities and the regions within that particular area. And this is very important, Mr. Speaker, because this talks about total inclusion of the local mwananchi, of the person on the ground who really needs these services directly. And that is why this fund is just strictly for the marginalized areas. These areas have also been in the bill. They've also been indicated. They have also been identified up to the region level, and the amount of funds in the bill, it clearly indicates how much. So with this indication of how much per every area, it becomes easier for the members who are going to sit in that particular committee per particular region, easier for them to be able to budget as per what is allocated or as per what is set aside for that particular area. Then this is very important, because without that in place, then planning becomes difficult. But when that is in place, it is easier for the committees to be able to well plan on a specific and a particular project that is going to be able to be commenced and finished within that particular budget, and hence there are going to be impactful results of that particular project, unlike situations whereby there is no committee and then maybe the governors bring up projects without looking at how much is needed. But that is stipulated very, very well in this particular a very important bill. Mr. Speaker, in the committee during our meetings, we engage different stakeholders. And we've had very good engagements with different stakeholders, ranging from the National Treasury, Mr. Speaker, who have also been able to have their input. And we've really been able to discuss one key element on why these funds have been able to have delayed, because, as I said earlier, the initial appropriation amount was 54 billion. And out of this, only 26 billion is what National Treasury was able to approve. On top of that, only 12 billion is what has already been dispersed to the different marginalized area. And so there's an outstanding of 13 billion. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, in our deliberation with National Assembly, out of the 13 billion, only 10 billion has been appropriated in the first supplementary budget. And hence, there's a deficit of around 300 billion. As a committee, we advised and decided that let the 10 billion pass and be able to be dispersed to the marginalized regions, and hence the balance of because it is already appropriated, so as not to create any delays, so that these funds can be able to be taken to to be appropriated as per the schedule. And so the balance of the 3 billion will be now incorporated with the balance from the main 54 billion less 26 billion. The outstanding balance of about 28 billion will be now added. The 3 billion will be added so that these funds can now be allocated. We also had different stakeholders, the Council of Governors. The Council of Governors were able to clearly state and also were able to table the existing projects. They were able to mention about 300 projects that were in place in total, but about 120 projects are the projects that have been completed, and then hence the rest are stalling. The reason that they are stalling, according to the Council of Governors, is because of untimely disbursement of these particular funds for these projects. Also, the challenges that they have been able to mention earlier in terms of the contractors still holding because of maybe delayed. But we were able to insist to the Council of Governors that it is very important because we realize there's a strategy or a technique whereby when new governors take office, then they want to come up with their own project. But we were able to advise that it is very important for them to ensure that they complete the existing projects that are in place. Further to that also, to ensure that these projects are not just buildings or houses, but are going to be able to be impactful to the people because they are going to utilize those projects for the mandate that they are required to be able to utilize. Mr. Speaker, with the other stakeholders that we've been able to actually walk a very nice journey with the CRA. Commission of Revenue Allocation were able to have their input because they are the ones who also guide as far as the allocations and identification of the marginalized areas are concerned. And that's how they are able to settle to 34 counties that are marginalized and also specifying the specific areas. Because it doesn't mean that if a county, like for example, Tharaka Nithi is also in this list, it doesn't mean it's the whole of Tharaka Nithi, but a section and an area that is identified as the marginalized area. And these are areas that, as I said earlier, strictly it is matters of water. As you know, Mr. Speaker, water is life. Water is everything. Without water, we tend not to be able to harvest a lot in all different areas, be it the home use, be it the agricultural sector. And as you know, with water, then it becomes much more resourceful, much more impactful to the local regions. One of the regions that is in these 34 counties is areas like Mandera, areas like Turkana. And we believe through this bill, Mr. Speaker, areas like Turkana, Marsabit, areas of Mwingi, when we have these funds, and getting to the counties and being able to execute exactly what has been identified or what has been the main focus of this particular fund, there's going to be an impact. We are going, the counties are going actually from all angles are going, yes, to receive the national allocation. They're also going to receive this equalization fund and any other grants that they normally receive. And with proper implementation of the project, proper use of the funding that has been allocated, there is going to be quite a very big improvement. It is also wise to note, Mr. Speaker, that the University of National African Women Economic Empowerment Hub was able to also come on board to the committee. They were also able to state their input, and much more focus is because, Mr. Speaker, the National African Women's Economic really were very positive, as much as they focused on the women in the mashinani areas, women in the marginalized areas. Because when the lives of these women are going to be improved, because we are going to, these funds are going to ensure that provision of basic elements like water, like electricity, as I said, like good roads, as I said, then it's not only going to impact the local area, but even the women in those particular regions. Because as stated earlier, these four essential mandates for this particular fund cut across a wider range of social economic empowerment to our women in the marginalized areas. And why am I insisting on women, Mr. Speaker? This is because in these regions mostly, the number of women, as far as gender is concerned, is more bigger than the number of the male factor, because these are very remote areas that mostly women have been the ones who have been left in these particular regions. But when these facilities are put in these particular regions, then it is, as I said earlier, it's not just for the area just improve, but also empowering the local women who are in those particular regions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in our deliberations in the committee, we were able to note some of the conditions that the counties were able to put in place so as to receive the disbursement. And some of them included that the funds should just be utilized for the projects in the marginalized areas. You find that if these funds are not going to focus and are going to be diverted for either any other recurrent use expenditure, for example, or any other project that the governors could have started, then it deviates from initial mandate of what really needs to be utilized. And you realize, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important fund, because we have areas that are very well improved. And the reason this fund needs to be adopted and needs to quickly be remitted to these counties is because it really cuts and offers those services that are not, that the funds from the national level is not able to offer. And it helps at least unify and bring and give an opportunity to all Kenyans in this country, not just in areas that are more urban, that have more advantages. Like you look at the issue of roads, Mr. Speaker, in regions like Turkana region, Mandera region, the surface area, yes, is very quite big. The land surface area is very quite big. But when these facilities are put in these areas, you find that they are going to improve not only the infrastructure, but also the business element. There's going to be much movement. If water is in these places, agriculture is going to improve. There's going to be production. When production is there and there's value addition to this particular product, Mr. Speaker, then you realize that there's going to be improvement of the different economic areas, hence increase in the revenue that is supposed to come from these particular areas. An increase in revenue definitely will impact the region, will also be able to create job opportunities for our youth in those particular regions, because these facilities are there. The reason we have a devolved government is so as to ensure in those regions our people are able to get opportunities in those particular regions, Mr. Speaker. But if we do not ensure that that is in place, then we kill devolution indirectly, and that is not what us as Senate will pride in, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other condition that the county was able to state is the beneficiary counties must open county special purpose account at the Central Bank of Kenya. As I said, this fund is not an additional allocation, but it's a special fund, and so it is wise for it to have its own account. By it having its own account, then it becomes easier for better, transparent accounting systems without mixing up. And those funds and that account will be able to have its own, as I said earlier, there's a board, Equalization Fund Advisory Board. Then we have at the Mashinani level, Mr. Speaker, we have the members who have been selected to sit in those boards. And definitely also having this account specifically for this particular funds, it is more manageable. It is more clear. There's no mix-up that these funds were utilized for any other project. These funds were used to pay recurrent expenditures. That won't be the case, but it will be easy to manage. It will be easy to offer transparent accounting as far as these funds will be concerned for that particular marginalized area. Further to that, Mr. Speaker, the County Technical Committee also, we stated that it must place as provided in the PFM Act 2021 regulations. These are, as I mentioned earlier, these are the committees that will be able to identify the different projects depending on the area. Because you realize, Mr. Speaker, for projects to be identified in these areas, there needs to be also, the people need to be there. They also need to interconnect with other public institutions, so that whatever project is being put in place, for example, if they are putting electricity in this particular area, then that electricity is going to serve a bigger range. If it is the borehole, if it is the water that is going to be put in this particular area, then this area, these committees will help ensuring that this water will not just serve small number of people, but is going to serve a wider range of people. If it is a case example, Mr. Speaker, for the roads, then it will ensure that these roads are going to interconnect and are going to ensure that people from side this to moving to the other side are going to be able to have an infrastructure that does not only cover a smaller area, but a wider range of depending on the number of people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other condition we were able to state is also spending unit must comply with the existing laws and regulation. This is definitely governed. It's also guided as per our PFM Act, as earlier stated. Mr. Speaker, the committee considered the bid and made several observations in it. And some of these observations, Mr. Speaker, during the consideration of the 2022-2023 Supplementary Budget 1, the Supplementary Budget 1, the Equalization Fund entitlement of 6.8 billion for financial year 21-22 was reduced to 3.5 billion, leaving the 3.2 for appropriation. As I'd mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, this is the fund that was not included in Supplementary 1, and thus the total available appropriation is 10.3 billion. And we felt as a committee, through the wisdom of the committee, instead of going back and insisting on the 13 billion, we decided to let the appropriation of the 10 billion. And then we can be able to ensure that the balance of the 3 billion that has been left is going to be included in the balance from the main 44 billion, less 26 billion, hence 28 billion plus the 3 billion, giving an outstanding of about 31 billion that should be the main balance. So, that is what, as a committee, we settled for. Project identification, Mr. Speaker, and implementation under the second policy on marginalization is yet to be undertaken and will commence immediately after approval of the Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill 2023. This is very important, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, because it is when these funds have been remitted. The good thing is that as per the feedback and the update of the National Assembly, the committees are already in place, and they are going to undergo the right process of ensuring that they are also being gazetted so that they can be able to appropriate the funds depending on the amount of the fund. Hence, that will guide on the type of project that the fund can be able to undertake. Given that there are only 3 months remaining before the financial, actually not actually 3 months right now, it's less than 3 months, it's about two and a week for before the financial year lapses. So there's need to expedite very fast on this particular bid. And I also want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for ensuring that you have changed your order and you've been able to prioritize on this bill. Some of the projects under the first marginalization policy are yet to be completed. And why, Mr. Speaker? The reason is because of the delay occasioned by the stoppage of the expenditure of the fund by the High Court ruling, which had declared that equalization fund guidelines are or is unconstitutional and null and void as well. So there's need to expedite completion of this project so that the benefits are realized within the 34 counties, as I stated earlier, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee, having considered, recommended, as I said earlier, that the National Assembly should, by end of April 2023, submit it to Parliament a framework showing a clear action plan of how the pending funds, entitlements, and arrears will be recovered. Which area is this, Mr. Speaker? The area of the 31 billion, because it is about the 28 plus the 3 billion, which was not budgeted for in the first supplementary budget. And so then the committee also requested that the National Assembly be able to give a framework of how the total balance is going to be remitted to the 34 counties. Mr. Speaker, the committee also appreciates so much the support from our Secretariat, led by none other than Christopher Gitonga, who's the clerk of the committee, on ensuring that this bill is timely. And also, I want to thank my committee members who have been very supportive, who have been very who've been team players during these particular deliberations on this particular bill, Mr. Speaker. And it's at this point I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I request that my colleague, also member of the same committee, Senator Boni Alwale, to second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second this motion.
Senator Boni, we have 6 minutes to go.
Yes.
I don't know whether that will be adequate. If you want to second by way of Standing Order 108 so that you reserve your right to contribute later on to this motion, or
yes,
you want to...
It's better that way, Mr. Speaker, sir.
So then what you need to do under Standing Order 108, you just bow your head and leave it at that. Then you'll have reserved your right to contribute later on to this particular motion. Very well.
Thank you.
Honorable Senators, for the convenience of the Senate, it is now 12:55, and we're going to adjourn the sitting of the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Wednesday, 19th April 2023 in the afternoon at 2:30 p.m. Thank you.